I'm Justin Glaser. And this is Dan, who was kind enough to host me for this conversation. Dan, I guess I can go into a little bit of how we met and kind of set the stage a little bit. That
Yeah,
works for
please
you.
do.
Yeah. So as I shared with you, I had a health crisis in my early 20s, chronic fatigue, brain fog, automatic negative thoughts. Um, just terrible. Tried a dozen things, Western, Eastern medicine. Um, as is so common for people who have these issues, is you realize that people don't have the answers. And so you kind of have to become your own advocate. And in that process, I stumbled into a sauna a year into that process. It helped more than anything. I had no idea why. That sent me down an obsessive research rabbit hole to figure out how that made sense. There was no placebo. It wasn't like I was told information that would make me feel it was better. It just worked. So then I had to kind of reverse engineer why was sauna helping. And so that kind of developed into a thesis that you backed up. I came across your group. I came across the niacin sauna protocol. And then I decided to write a book to discuss these ideas called Sweat. I wanted to do for Sweat what James Nestor did for Breath with his book. And so I reached out. We had some great conversations, did some interviews, got your take on things. And yeah, it's been great since then. So just wanted to kind of set the stage for that. And maybe I'm sure your group knows your background, but maybe if you want to give a little overview on yourself.
Certainly. In fact, why don't you show your book so the group can see the cover?
So this is Sweat, Uncovering Your Body's Hidden Superpower by Justin
Excellent
Glaser.
book.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, in fact, congratulations on getting that published. It was excellently written, and I actually learned a few things. So, in fact, I've known a lot about the history of saunas because my editor and the one who wrote the foreword to my book is Dr. Nina Silver, who has published the big tome on sauna therapy. So she is quite the expert, and she basically taught me a lot about the history of saunas. But there are some things that you included in your book that I didn't have. And for those who don't know my book, I wrote the book called Sauna Detoxification Using Niacin, following the recommended protocol of Dr. David E. Root. And this book is on Amazon. I think yours is too.
It is, yeah. It is.
Yeah. So just for those who do not know who I am the son of Dr. David Root, who is known as a pioneer in the realm of human detoxification using sauna. He had originally repurposed a protocol that is designed for drug addiction rehab and repurposed it for occupational medicine, which is a rather interesting stretch because its history is one where the California Medical Board really questioned, why are you using this method in occupational medicine, which is unorthodox and not something that doctors are trained on? Well, because of a 50-page response letter he wrote to the medical board, because they actually did open a probe on him, they read through this, what turned out to be a research paper unto itself with 23 pages of cited references, and they wound up not only approving his use of this protocol because it was so successful, for heavy metal exposures and any kind of chemical, because really the medical literature has nothing for chemical detoxification. We have chelation. And we would use that in occupational medicine if it was an acute poisoning where somebody had just recently got exposed to something like mercury. We would certainly send them out for chelation, but there's nothing for PCBs or any kind of DDE or anything that we encounter in the environment from toxic and exposure. So essentially, he submitted this 50-page response letter. They approved his continued use of this for occupational medicine. And the state of California became his largest client. So that was a brief history of how this all got started back in 1982.
Yeah. And I think what's so interesting about this is we have these, and I just want to set the stage a little more. So we have these extreme examples, right? So 9/11 victims or Agent Orange or people who had massive exposure to chemicals who then used this protocol that your father was heavily involved in pioneering, which was taking niacin and getting in a sauna, to keep it very simple. But essentially that allows the detoxification process to get these substances out. So that's like the extreme version that magnifies how effective this is. In my personal case, what I believe happened and what I argue in the book is a few things. So one, massive underestimation of toxins and chemicals impact on our health, just across the board, even within the natural health community. So massive underestimation of what these substances are wreaking havoc across mental, physical, spiritual, even like health. if you want to term it that. And then a simple, and like you pulled up and showed me in terms of Google, a misunderstanding or a lack of knowledge that sweat is actually perhaps the best way to get these substances out in a way that nothing else can. And then sauna is the best way to sweat. And then the niacin sauna protocol just is this miraculous tool for detoxifying at a deeper level, particularly for lipophilic or fat-loving chemicals, not to get too technical, but allowing us to pull things out that have been held within the fat cells through the use of niacin paired with the sauna. So that's kind of, at least in my book, I'm trying to get those ideas across. Like, if you believe toxins are way worse than you think they are, and then sweat is the best way to get them out, and then sauna is the best way to sweat, and then infrared sauna is the best way to sauna, and then this niacin sauna protocol is a game changer. You're kind of led to some conclusions, like but one conclusion you're led to, if you believe those things, should be everyone should be doing the niacin sauna protocol. Because in the modern world, you're just exposed to so much that's causing all these issues. Even like, and I think what's missing, and I'll let you talk in a second, but I think even just like almost like a poison drip of cognitive function, in the sense that like you might be fine and feel fine, and maybe cancer's waiting for you in 20 years from these things or something like that, God forbid. But even like your day-to-day brain function, I think across the planet is being hampered by these substances, is kind of an argument I'm led to. And from my own personal experience, it felt that way. Once I started saunaing regularly, I went through the 30-day niacin protocol with you, felt some interesting improvements. Everyone's different. But that's why I'm so passionate about it. I think that's why you are. It's just a matter of how to package these ideas, which is what I tried to do, and make it a succinct delivery vehicle for kind of teeing it up to the niacin sauna protocol, which is what your book exclusively focuses on. So just wanted to share that.
Yes, in fact, you brought up several points. In fact, I think we probably ought to touch upon some of the more mainstream, conventional medicine thinking on this, because there's nothing in the medical literature for chemical or even radiation. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned that, but this will actually detox radiation. But there's nothing in the medical literature to detox chemicals, which we are inundated by in our environment. And the important thing to keep in mind is that the medical world, especially through I would call pharma shills, have definitely put the argument out there that you cannot sweat toxins out through your sweat glands. And some will go on further to say in a sauna. And in fact, I'd like to do a screen share if I can, and just go ahead and show the conventional wisdom here is that the sweat is 99% water and 1% salt. But here's a whole list of different debunking things that say you can't sweat toxins, or can you really sweat them out? The thing is that these folks are really not paying attention to what our protocol is actually doing. So if I continue to scroll, you'll just see there's several different articles that are trying to debunk this whole concept. So I'm going to do a slide deck here and just show a couple of points that actually prove that they're right. You do not sweat toxins out through your sweat glands in the sauna. So let me show you where that comes into play. You have to first understand the wordplay that these folks are using. So they're talking about you cannot sweat toxins out through your sweat glands. So let's talk about the definition of toxins. If you look under Google through the Oxford Language Dictionary, you'll see that a toxin is an antigenic poison or venom of plant or animal origin, especially one produced by or derived from microorganisms and causing disease when present at low concentrations in the body. I didn't hear anything there about heavy metals or man-made chemicals. And in fact, the Wikipedia over here says a toxin is a harmful substance produced within living cells or organisms, semicolon, synthetic toxicants created by artificial processes are thus excluded. So the word toxicant they use is the actual word. So environmental toxicants are what we are exposed to. Toxins are more like, your bacterial waste or things that die off, parasitic stuff. Those are toxins. So when we deal with toxicants that are outside of the body, that's what we're really exposed to. But once they get inside of the body, they become what are called xenobiotics, or substances foreign to the body. And as you pointed out earlier, most of them are lipophilic or fat attracted. So that means that they're hydrophobic, and they do not come out through your sweat glands. They come out through a different type of gland, which I'm going to show in, I guess, the next slide looks like. So here you've got a cutaway of skin, and you can see that the watery eccrine sweat glands are all over your skin, of course, and we know that as perspiration. So whenever you're out exercising or doing anything that produces heat, your body regulates the temperature through sweat, and that is about 99% water and about 1% salts. So how do we get toxins to come out of the body? It's through the sebaceous oil glands, which are lipophilic, or they're lipid based, I'm sorry, and they're attached to the hair follicles. So these sebaceous oil glands produce what's called sebum. And sebum keeps the hair follicle lubricated and the skin and hair moist, so that it basically, keeps you from drying out too much. And it also provides a sort of a protective barrier against some of the bacterial, things, not necessarily pollution, but it does provide some kind of protection. Anyway, so these oil glands are how the lipophilic or fat attracted or fat soluble xenobiotics are going to be released from the body. So it's not coming out through your sweat glands. So when they say that you cannot sweat toxins out through your sweat glands in a sauna, they're 100% correct, but they're also trying to deceive you. So I could continue with this part of it, but let's go ahead and cover a couple of other things, because I do want to talk about how the protocol works, but we can cover that in a little bit. There's a couple of things that you did ask me earlier about, like why this protocol is not so popular. And partly is because of that whole, deception out there that you don't sweat toxins out through your sweat glands. But the secondary thing is the fact that we've been in occupational medicine for 36 years or so with this program, and only just recently, as of 2019, published the book. So it's trying to really get it out there at this point. But thanks to COVID, we kind of had a couple of years there where nobody was really wanting to come to our center, or really, the timing was so terrible. But I think we're coming out of that, and things are starting to look much better, and hopefully people will hear more about it.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. I identify a couple other main reasons, right? One being the guy who figured out that niacin and sauna works happened to be associated with, was L. Ron Hubbard. So oh, okay, that makes sense. So people immediately throw the baby out with the bathwater, but taking niacin and getting in a sauna does not change your religion. So, okay, that contributes to why it's been hard to catch on. And then the other, obviously, is just the incentive structure of the entire medical system is not aligned towards how do we make people as healthy as humanly possible. Because that it's not the North Star, the ship's not going to move in that direction. So even if the heads of all the hospitals, or however you want to look at how the system is set up, went, oh my God, this actually works, there's not going to be a mass crew. There's not going to be some massive turning of this enormous ship. It needs to be almost in the same way. I'm kind of come from tech a little bit. So in the same way, a startup comes in and disrupts. It needs to come from those types of things rather than sort of a whole systemic thing. But certainly, you would hope
I think the standard of care is what you're really pointing to, because it's like a big oil tanker out there on the ocean. It does take about 10 years for that ship to turn. And so, we're not going to see any major changes in the near future with this. And in fact, I prefer to keep it in a homeopathic or, holistic protocol, because frankly, there is nothing about this program that really does need a medical doctor. However, you mentioned earlier too that everybody really should do this program because we are so polluted and getting so toxic living here. In reality, though, there are preclusions and contraindications that have to be considered. And that includes everything from pregnancy and breastfeeding, the fact that you may have a pacemaker or defibrillator, or have some kind of heart condition that would absolutely preclude you from it. Yeah. There's hemophilia and several others, and we do post those contradictions and preclusions on our website. So the website, by the way, is getdetoxinated.com, and I'll probably put that up on a text block here in a little bit. But anyway, so it's something that, we don't see changes occurring rapidly with this. And I do think that more holistic doctors and functional medicine doctors are starting to really understand better that the barriers to good health come from the toxins in the body. In fact, that could lead to the next slide, as a matter of fact, if I may.
Sure.
So bring up the screen share. It'll be back to the sebaceous oil glands. So one of the important things to realize with the lipophilic xenobiotics is they get into the fat. They even get past the cell membranes of the fat. And that's where a lot of people get hung up. They think that it's the lipid bilayer of the cell membrane where these toxins store. But no, they get actually into the fat cells.
Mm-hmm.
And once they get in there, they can cause a problem for the mitochondria. And if you don't know anything about mitochondria, they are the powerhouse or the engines in the body that produce what's called adenosine triphosphate, or ATP energy, which our bodies need to be able to function. So ATP energy is being produced all the time. It starts off in the fat cells with the triglycerides that break down, and they produce what's called glycerol and fatty acids, which then become free fatty acids. And that's going to be an important thing to know when I get down to the point about how these toxins are liberated. But the thing about these mitochondria is that they are going to be damaged by the toxins. So let me just show you this. So mitochondria is a target of environmental toxins. This is a study that shows that mitochondrial dysfunction is as a hallmark of environmental injury or environmental toxicants. Keep that word in mind. And then this is a roll-up of several studies, but more importantly, mitochondrial dysfunction is the root cause of many diseases. And this is something we have known for many, many years, but this study came out in 2017. We've been working with this program since 1980, my father 82. I got involved in 1986. So, but the next one.
I like the word, sorry, if you go back, the word bewildering. Cause of many diseases that are bewildering in their variety and complexity. And so I think that kind of alludes to the law of one to many, like the one cause causing the many issues. It's like all springing from this toxin issue. I just want to interject just real quick. You know, it was interesting writing my book because I was trying to bridge like clearly like your day-to-day scientific literature and like research and like the studies and things like that can be a lot to take in, like a lot of new words, a lot of new information, and trying to bridge that to, okay, what does this mean for me? And like, you know, even mitochondrial dysfunction is the root cause of many diseases. It's like, okay, what we're really saying is toxins cause energy problems, let's call it that are the root cause of many of your problems. So toxins are the issue, right? So it's like almost like those videos on YouTube where we explain it to, they'll have like a musician explaining a concept to a third grader, then a high schooler, then a college, and then someone at Juilliard, and they're explaining it in different levels, right? So trying that was my goal, at least, was to kind of make this really easily digestible so someone could like just take the info and run with it. But go ahead, let's keep moving.
Yeah, you did a good job too. Okay, so the next slide was showing that chronic fatigue syndrome, for example, is one of many things. In fact, this next slide has a whole list of toxins or diseases caused by mitochondrial dysfunction thanks to the toxins, like autism, ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, diabetes. And in fact, I know asthma, fibromyalgia, pretty much any of the chronic or adrenal fatigue type syndromes are all pretty much related to toxicant exposures. And I've seen so many things reversed with this program, which was kind of fascinating because in occupational medicine, we were just dealing with, you know, exposures to things from the workplace or things like you mentioned, 9/11 from the New York Rescue Workers Detoxification Project, which, by the way, ran from 2002 to 2007 and treated well over 4,000 first responders, volunteers, and some civilians that were involved with the cleanup efforts at Ground Zero. And every time they'd lift any kind of, you know, debris, they would get this new toxic cloud of dust that lifts up, and they would breathe it in or absorb it through their skin. And many of them came down with what's called the World Trade Center cough. And so we were called out to see if we could work with these folks. And thanks to people like Tom Cruise, since you've brought up the fact that this originated from the L. Ron Hubbard's Purification Rundown, which the Church of Scientology considers to be kind of a baptismal rite. We have no connection, by the way, with the Church of Scientology. However, my father was working with a splinter group of Scientologists that brought this to the public without this guise or stigma of recruitment. There's been known for many years about the drug addiction rehab program that they've run for, you know, these decades, which is called Narconon. And Narconon is a recruitment center. So this group was bringing the drug addiction rehab to the public without that stigma. And so basically my father got a brochure from them, and he really didn't see much value in it. But then he realized they were using saunas to help detox these drug addicts. And what it
Yep.
was that the drug residues are storing in the fat and re-stimulating anytime the body's producing ATP energy, which I'm going to cover that in greater detail in a slide coming up in shortly here.
Let me just ask, just in terms of people you've treated with. The first question, if you don't mind, like a little detour, how many people have you taken through the protocol total? Like
throughout the years, or me personally?
Let's say you personally the last 5 years.
Yeah, I've done probably closer to 300 people by now since we brought it to the public in 2019. And most of the work I do is remote now because we do not have a working center. As of 2022, at the end of 2022, we did not renew the lease to the center because COVID was really impacting our ability to even afford the place. So we shut that down, but I've written a book and I do remote detox coaching so that I can help people to get through this program based on my experience and knowledge. And I use this same tool, Zoom, to be able to work with folks. So it's something that helps a lot of people. And I've seen so many things reversed with this. It's actually mind blowing. And in fact, there is.
So let's go into it. So like what I asked about autism specifically because I have a cousin with autism. What have you seen in terms of reversals? We've discussed heavy metal from like MRI contrast, gadolinium. What have been some of the most exciting kind of reversals you've seen?
Yes, in fact, you brought up something that I don't think the audience is very well aware of, but my group, there is a large contingent of people who know about MRIs and gadolinium contrast agents. So the MRIs use a very toxic rare earth metal if they do the contrast dye. Yeah. And if you can at all avoid it, if you need an MRI, I would, because it's not safe, no matter what they tell you. The people in my group are suffering from having a constellation of symptoms that include things like severe bone pain, electrical sensations, or brain zaps. Yeah. They've got everything from their temperature, the body temperature is always cold, and things like they're just absolutely unrealistic, but they live through it. Fortunately, we've been able to reverse those symptoms based on our protocol. I will stress, though, that this is not a one and done. In fact, our studies have always shown that this detox can reduce the body burden by about a third. So many people will need to do this more than once. And I'll say if you've even had one MRI with gadolinium, you're probably going to plan to do this about 4 times over the course of maybe a year or two. But just know that one is a very severe one that I deal with. Things that I've seen that have been reversed that at first were shocking were things like fibromyalgia, asthma. And then I have a testimonial on the website from I guess she's patrol woman, Jessica B. Rivers from New York. And she has a whole list of things that were reversed, improved. And one of them, which was a mind blow, was endometriosis. So or allergies even. Mm-hmm. So she had several different things that were reversed thanks to this program. So it is amazing to see what happens when the barriers to good health are removed, like the toxicants, which are then xenobiotics in the body.
Yeah. I mean, I found it to be, there's a lot of ways to take, if you start to buy into this paradigm, there's a lot of ways to take it. One being like, oh my God, toxins are everywhere. The other one is really empowering in terms of the idea that like your body's meant to work. And when you get the things out that are disrupting like the miracle of the human body, it functions amazingly well. Not medical advice, but my experience with saunas was getting sick 6 to 8 times a year for a decade, to really only getting sick once in the last like 3 years because I didn't have access to a sauna in a moldy house in France.
Right.
So like, there's just crazy implications from these ideas, which is what I'm interested in, like the philosophy, I guess, of like, what does this mean? What should we take from this? And like, how can this kind of promulgate more, which was my mission with my book and your mission with your work. So it's just, it's exciting to educate people.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, I am a living testament to this protocol because I went through the original Hubbard method back in 1986. And back then we were doing 4.5 to 5 hours a day, most of that time in a sauna. In fact, you'll see a little bit more of how this protocol works in the upcoming slide. But just so you know, I went through it in 1986 and I had a tremendous turnaround. As a matter of fact, I really did not want to go through the program. I had absolutely zero interest in it. It became a requirement for my job because I went to work for my father to fully implement a computer system that I installed in 1985. So by 1986, I was needed to work there and get it fully implemented. And in order to get the job there, they wanted me to go through the program. And that's more evident when you read my book. But just know that I went 33 days kicking and screaming, probably their worst patient, their worst client, whatever, because I absolutely had no desire to go through it. And it was back then 4.5 to 5 hours a day. And there was nothing to help with the rest of your day after coming off a daily session. This will become more evident as I go through the slide deck. But on day 33, I hit what's called end phenomena. And it was a game changer. It turned me from being their worst enemy to being their biggest proponent of this program. Unfortunately, because of the Scientology stigma, as well as the fact that it was 4.5 to 5 hours a day, I did not see this going mainstream or into the public realm. That all changed in 2014. Another thing I'm going to show you in a little bit. But so the thing about what I hit on day 33, the end phenomena, it's characterized by having an overall sense of well-being. You got high energy, stamina, and performance. Your brain fog lifts, which I didn't even know I had. Your IQ points can reclaim or be regained by about 10 points on average. We would do IQ testing before and after, and we would see anywhere from 7 to 14 points being reclaimed, and I hit 10 points. Also, the color vision and your sense of smell and your sense of taste become more vivid, and your dreams become more vivid, and you remember them better. And when I hit that, I became reborn, literally. I mean, I felt like a whole new person. And ever since 1986, I don't get sick. I turned 60 in September, and I feel like a healthy 39-year-old. And it's amazing because once the body can take care of itself, then you don't really need to worry too much about the pathogens or anything like that are out there. I do sauna daily. That is an important part of my routine. So, and I know that you've got a routine that you want to talk about too. But I have a morning routine where literally 2 hours before I know I'm going to be on camera, I will preheat the sauna, then do 30 minutes of sauna, and get dressed, and then have some breakfast, and then I'm ready to go. So it became part of my daily routine, and I do miss it when I don't have it. So
yeah, for sure. So I mean, I had a similar experience, and like I said, I did a sauna session and felt better than, after just one session, better than any other intervention or tool I used. But it was just no niacin. It was just a 30-minute session, and it was like pulling back layers, I guess. And I think it was just slowly lowering my toxic load over time, where I'd step out. I remember doing my first 100 milligrams of niacin and stepping out. It was like the movie Limitless with Bradley Cooper, where it's all of a sudden it's like he's online. And so I think the point with that is, like, if you have to ask if you're at 100%, you're not at 100%. Because once you're there, you're like, oh, this is what we're supposed to be feeling like all the time, and this is what the modern world has robbed us of. Because I mentioned in my book, it's like the baby in the blood of the newborns that they tested. The average was something like 287 chemicals were found.
That's right. Yes.
And that's how you're starting, because the mother's passing that on to the child, and then the greatest sign of your toxic load is age. So you're just accumulating this as you go through. The brain is 60% fat. It's fat loving. So a lot of these lipophilic toxins store in there. So, kind of connecting the pieces backwards, it makes sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So shall I go ahead and explain how this program works? I think people are probably wanting to hear that by now. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen.
Yeah.
All right. So we've already covered the fact that there's a lot of different diseases that they've already shown are, part of the problem with toxins. But
you haven't had a chance to, sorry, just quick, ALS, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, those three you haven't had a chance to work with yet?
There are two people I'm working with right now that have a parent who has Parkinson's, and right now we don't have them completed through the cycle, so I don't have any data for the Parkinson's. Autism is one where I've had several people approach me and want to try it with their children, but I think there's a hesitancy because younger children may not want to be in the heat. But I certainly believe that this protocol can help with this condition. I certainly believe that it's heavy metal related, mostly probably in the aluminum, maybe mercury realm. But frankly, I've not had anybody go through the program with a child with ASD that has been able to really prove to me that it works. So I do believe it will, though. And anybody who wants to step forward and put their child through, I'd love to work with you. But the Alzheimer's is one that most people with Alzheimer's are, going to be elderly. And the thing with that is that there is no upper age limit for our program, but maybe they can't tolerate the heat. And if you catch it early on, I'm sure that this program would be very beneficial. But again, we only brought this out in 2019. We've been in the COVID lockdowns and everything. I just have not had the opportunity to really do any kind of studies. I would love to do a whole series of studies. There's so many things. And eventually we will get a center that we can start doing controlled studies out of. But at the moment, I'm basically working from home and helping people as best as I can. So,
yeah, but this is a massively, once you buy into these ideas, you realize it's a massively under-researched. It's just ripe with opportunity for research. And
true that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is a picture of my father from back in the day. In fact, this was the second detox center. This opened up, this was running prior to the New York Rescue Workers Detox Program. So this particular center was shut down so that the entire staff could move to New York and start treating the 4,000 plus, first responders and everybody.
And today you would have them just in cotton white towels, right? No clothing in the sauna.
Well, the people who are doing this from home are even probably in their birthday suit. I would hope so, because the less you wear, the better for your sweat. And we do have people sitting on towels to pick up any, maybe colorful materials, which is a slide I'll show you guys. But this was an example of one of the centers. And I ran the medical practice while my father was in New York or traveling back and forth. So how does the niacin protocol work is the big question that we're going to answer right now. So firstly, you've already heard me talk about adenosine triphosphate or ATP energy, and that's an important thing to keep in the back of your mind for this, because anytime triglycerides are broken down in a process called lipolysis or lipolysis or even lipolysis, you'll hear me say in some videos. I'm using lipolysis now because it just is, I think, more appropriate. Anyway, what you're seeing in this control group here is what we would call lipolysis. So how does this work? We've got a study group here that was also the control group. There's about a month between the two, but this study was done by Wang et al. In 2000, and it was a glucose study. So it had nothing to do with the protocol. But the glucose study was using niacin to temporarily increase glucose. And when I say temporarily, so diabetics don't need to worry about higher glucose levels. It's something that's very tertiary or temporary and does not affect the body. But they were using niacin to increase the levels. So, and the thing that we discovered is going to be the game changer for that 4.5 to 5 hour window being reduced. But the 6 hour period that you're seeing here, the free fatty acid concentrations in the blood plasma were being recorded. So every half hour they would take the reading. And the peaks that you see here, there's probably more activity, like they were walking or doing something that required more energy. But anytime there's any adenosine triphosphate or ATP energy being produced, there is some siphoning off of substances from the fat cells when the free fatty acids come out. You've got to know that the mitochondria use both the glycerol and the free fatty acids, or the fatty acids at this initial stage, to produce ATP energy. And when the cells are toxic, you've got an interruption of the enzymes and proteins that the mitochondria also need to help produce this energy. But that's where the mitochondrial dysfunction comes in. So anytime you're producing ATP energy and there's free fatty acids coming out of the fat to go populate other cells that may not be adipose or fat cells, but they have mitochondria that need these materials to produce ATP energy, there's going to be some siphoning effect of these substances during the period of time where these free fatty acids leave the cell. So just know that if you've ever done a HIIT workout or something strenuous, your body was producing a lot more energy, and therefore more free fatty acids were being liberated, and you're going to have a headache or nausea type feeling, perhaps. And they'll tell
To
you
clarify that, so free fatty acids being liberated, because a lot of this is, you're in this day to day. For 99% of us, even I just wrote a book on this, and it's still like, whoa. The idea being the free fatty acids contain a lot of these lipophilic or fat loving toxins, and they're being liberated, which is causing it to circulate in the bloodstream. Is that the idea?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I kind of wish I had a particular slide in this deck, but let me bring up a deck that has that right now. So if this pops up on the big screen.
And just for like audience understanding, you do a sauna session, you have a little bit of these lipophilic toxins in the bloodstream or in the body that are able to be excreted. When you take niacin, and you'll go into this in more depth, it's liberating a ton of these, like a decade of stored toxins into the bloodstream, which is why you need to sweat it out. And it's totally safe when you time it right. But yeah.
So maybe this will help to explain it for everybody. This is a fat cell, a representation of one. And I mentioned that the toxins people thought were in this lipid bilayer, which is the cell membrane, but no, they get inside there. What you're seeing here in the orange is the triglycerides, which will be broken down through lipolysis, or what's called lipolysis, into a glycerol and 3 fatty acids, which then help the mitochondria to be able to produce ATP energy. And so when the toxins are, or when the free fatty acids, which are the breakdown of this orange representation here, when those glycerol and fatty acids leave the fat cell, they siphon off some of these toxins with them. So it's basically normal liberation of toxins is happening, pretty much at all times that your body's producing energy, which should be all the time. Otherwise, you're dead. So I hope that slide might give some idea of what I'm talking about here. But let me close this out. Okay, so the control group was recording over a 6-hour period, and they were basically just pretty flatline. But when they were given niacin, and this is a predictable event. Now, most people are familiar with the flush from niacin, and that was what was believed to be the reason niacin was so important on this protocol. The flush causes, or the niacin causes, a vasodilation, or an opening of the capillaries, which allows more red blood cells to flow out to the skin or dermal layers. And this redness is obvious. You can see the flush. And the immune response wants to know what's causing that, so it sends histamines to see if there's anything needing to be dealt with. And it's what causes this itchy, prickly sensation that people report. So the flush is something that we thought was the most important reason for the niacin, because it would then push any bloodborne toxins out to the skin layers or the dermal layers so that the sebaceous glands can then sweat them out. What we discovered, and in fact, we've known about this since 1987, 86, 87 timeframe, is a process is called rebound lipolysis. And this is something that is set up in the body while niacin is metabolizing. So the niacin has a 20 to 40 minute half-life. It goes through 5.5 half-lives, and it takes about 3 hours 2.5 really, for it to completely wear off to the point where the body's able to regenerate or resume the lipolysis and that ATP production. But it will invariably overshoot, and it produces 4 times normal levels. So this is 4 times normal levels of free fatty acids that are present in the blood concentrations. And that translates to a 3 times liberation of toxins over the normal levels. So our protocol actually is more effective in the last 2 hours of the original Hubbard method, 4.5 to 5 hours. So we now have you do exercise in sauna in the last 2 hours of the original program. So you would take your niacin, and pretty much you don't need to do much of anything else, but you will start exercising after about 2.5 to 3 hours. And then you'll do 20 to 30 minutes of this low impact aerobic exercise just to get the heart rate back up again and push more blood out to the dermal layers. And then we have to go into the sauna. And it's typically with an infrared sauna about a total of 75 minutes, but it's broken down into a 45-minute sauna cycle, and then about 5 to 15-minute break, and then another 30-minute sauna cycle. So there's also a lot of moving parts here. We're doing activated charcoal, we're doing zeolite, we're doing electrolytes. There's a calcium and magnesium beverage called CalMag that is going to help with both the muscle spasms, cramping, and twitching that you may experience in extended sauna periods. Plus, it does help with the lead and gadolinium that store in bone. It helps to displace that. So, but there's a lot of moving parts. You know, the binders were the biggest addition after understanding better that the rebound lipolysis occurs after about 2.5 to 3 hours. This was important because my father had a study that was done back in 1980 something or other. He didn't do it. It was a study he found. And it was showing that rebound lipolysis occurs within 50 minutes of ingesting niacin. Well, it turns out that study was done on sheep, and apparently humans metabolize niacin at a much slower pace. So once we discovered that it wasn't a 50-minute rebound, it was actually 3 hours, roughly after 3 hours that you're at the peak of this thing. That's when the game was changed for us. We could now offer something that was more manageable in a 2.5-hour period. And the other change, and the important change, was the difference between the dry sauna and the far infrared saunas. The dry saunas tend to produce more of the liquid watery sweat, whereas the infrared saunas are much more able and more efficiently able to produce sebaceous sweat at lower temperatures that are more tolerable. So that was the second big change after the understanding of the niacin rebound. And then the third big change was adding the binders. So those are the main changes. There's a total of about 8 different changes, but those are the important ones. Yeah. I think that is probably all I have for this slide deck that is going to be of importance. Oh no, we've got to show the towels. So this right here is an example of towels that we see when somebody is extremely toxic. What you're looking at here is a meth cop from New York. He heard about the Utah Meth Cops Project, which is another study that was done. The 9/11 study was published. The then Attorney General for the state of Utah, Mark Shurtleff, had funded 68 police officers who were involved with meth lab raids, who get inundated with the chemicals used in the manufacturing of meth, and it ain't nothing like what you saw in Breaking Bad, by the way. But they would get full of chemicals and things that'd be thrown during the melees, But anyway, the Utah Meth Cops Project treated 68 police officers very successfully, and that's a study you can find on our website. But this New York cop came in because he was involved with 180 meth lab raids, and once he hit what we call a target niacin dose, it's 10 milligrams per kilogram, by the way. His towels started producing these either tan stains, purplish blue stains, or like this one you see here, which we call the tie-dye towel. And that was extremely revealing to see, because every day on that program, since he hit his target niacin dose, he was producing these towels. Now, the blue stain, by the way, that we see on the towel is actually sodium hydroxide, which is the main ingredient for Drano. So he was actually full of Drano.
Thanks.
This was one of our first responders who was at the cleanup efforts at Ground Zero. And the purple blue stain that you see here, we had the swatch tested, and this one came back morbidly high in manganese. So this guy was totally, inundated with manganese, and that's from the steel construction for the towers. So he was basically absorbing and inhaling manganese. I guess I can show the primary benefits to the protocol. But anyway, this is something that is reported by the people going through the program, and not everybody's going to have the same results. Your results may vary, but just know that besides the conditions that we've reversed, these are some of the more generic type of benefits. So. Yeah. All right, I hope that explains well enough how the program works. And I will mention, too, that I offer a complimentary consultation, and I do prefer the Zoom. And I'll put the link to heal.me/detox in the description of this video.
Yeah. And I'll say you went deep into the science and everything, but actually going through the protocol was pretty straightforward and simple. There's timing some supplements, there's sweating, there's exercise, and just making sure you're following the steps. But safe, painless, and then obviously all those benefits are just huge and life changing.
Yeah, absolutely. So
one of the main things I think of it when I walk down the street or when I talk to people who are into health or not into health or have done this nice who sauna or don't sauna, is it's almost like if you're a wrestler and you see someone else walking by and you can tell they're also a wrestler, like you can see it. I feel like you can see in people's eyes if they've done a certain degree of like either health work or like detox work. And definitely with like the niacin sauna protocol, I notice it. There's something like the seat of the soul thing. Like you see it in the eyes, like where people are at. So I think it's important work. Well, I mean, I'll say like if you're looking for a really in-depth analysis of the niacin protocol at an extreme level, there's nothing more comprehensive than what you've put out. If you're looking to understand more of, what I tried to put together was sort of like an A to Z of why sweat is so important that leads into the niacin sauna protocol. You can get that on Amazon, Sweat by Justin Glaser. But definitely check that out. It was pretty cool to see it hit the bestseller list for the week it came out.
yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you. And I really tried to make it easily digestible and really practical with takeaways, whether you're just starting to consider using sauna in your life or you're ready to do your second round of the niacin sauna protocol. But I think we're both on a similar mission in terms of just sharing this information because it's so under talked about, and the smart people who I know who've read it, who have texted me, they're like, I get it. Like the thesis makes sense. Like this adds up essentially. So yeah.
Yeah. In fact, there is something else I did want to show you because ironically, there was actually a email blast by Dr. Mercola today, of all things. Let's see if that comes up here. So I'm doing a screen share again, but this is Mercola's today, from today. So, but he's already done episodes about sweat because he interviewed Dr. George Yu many years ago. Dr. George Yu is one of our colleagues, and he's more of a gregarious, outgoing guy that was basically doing the circuit with David Wolf and things like that. But anyway, this was Mercola's deal today. You can subscribe to him and get his whole thing here. But I did save this as a PDF because his work disappears after about 48 hours. So I wanted to just show people that there is this page on our website that you can get to from the info tab down here at studies. And a lot of these are presentations too. So there's studies and presentations. My father's actually presented to the WHO, the CDC, the EPA, Congressional Oversight Committee for the Gulf War Syndrome, and several other things. So he's and UNESCO is one he's been to. But anyway, a lot of these are linked, but some of them are not, unfortunately. I wanted to come down here, though, that here's several studies that validate you do actually sweat toxins out. So these were not done by us. These are other studies, and it's important to be aware of them. And then,
and by the way, those studies for like the average person, like you need those studies to go, oh, okay. But if you were in 9/11 and nothing else worked, and then that works, you understand why. And you look at the towels, it's like, duh, like it's obvious. But
no doubt.
Fortunately, now we do have some PubMed stuff coming out about it.
Yes. And in fact, thanks for bringing that up, too, because one of the first civilians to go through the protocol, I'm allowed to use her name, Anne-Marie Principe. And she was on a podcast with my father and I several years back. It was Dr. Daniel Amen's The Brain Warrior's Way podcast with his wife, Tana. And she tells her story about how she's alive today because of this protocol. You can find that in our videos section of the website. If I can scroll back up fast enough here, I'll show you. So you can get to it from the video library. But
I feature her in the book as well.
That's right, you did, yes. And her story is so phenomenal, but she's mentioned to us several times now that in all the years since they went through this program, remember, it went from 2002 to 2007. In that time, only 3 people that she knows about from the group that went through have passed away.
Yeah.
In the group that did not go through the protocol back in those years when it was open, they have been passing away 1.2 per day practically
Yeah.
since the event. So it's a rather remarkable statistic, but unfortunately, there's no way to do any kind of study with that one.
Well,
But
that's an example though, right? Like what,
yeah,
based on this info, you'd hypothesize, okay, if we took 10,000 people and put them through the niacin sauna protocol twice in a year and checked on them compared to the population, I think you'd see everything just go way down. Cancer rates, diabetes, because of the insulin receptor poisoning, all this stuff that's linked to the toxins. I think you'd see mortality rates go down. Just everything would be improved. And so that's kind of you need to get to that point where people can wrap their heads around it, because it's
exactly.
breaking the
Yeah.
programming that we've been taught.
Exactly. And in fact, I think that the conventional medical system is all about sick care. They really are more about treating symptoms rather than the causes. And I think by now most people recognize that. But I just wanted to finish by showing that these are
Sure.
the 3 studies that validate the rebound lipolysis. And also know that anytime there is any kind of mobilization of lipids or fats in the body, there's going to be some of these toxins released. And in fact, I believe one of the studies up here shows that. I may not have posted it here, but there's definitely a study that shows that the DDT or DDE, actually the metabolite of it, is released through that. That was one study, and there's several others. But our studies have definitely concluded that the protocol is reducing the body burden, and it is about by a third, like I mentioned before. I will say in more detail, it's about 30 to 65% of the reduction based on what was the chemical or heavy metal, what was the nature of it, was it acute or chronic poisoning, what was the amount, what was the body mass. There's a lot of different variables that were involved with the studies. So we just say, okay, let's call it a third of the body burden, because after all these years of working with people, we realize that it takes multiple 30-day programs to really get the kind of results people are looking for. But also you need to be aware that while you're on the program, your body's in a heightened sense of sympathetic mode. So that fight or flight mode, the parasympathetic versus the sympathetic. So your body's more in a heightened state where you're probably not going to really realize many of the benefits during the program. But if you do a 2-week pause between 30-day programs at minimum, then you'll find that during that 2 weeks, your body returns to homeostasis and also resets the niacin back to 0 so you can start over. But the 2-week period there is where most people will start to realize their gains. So that's an important thing to realize.
Right. And then there's the other side, which is you don't wake up with cancer in 20 years or something like that.
Exactly.
You're aware of it. There's the health, immediate feeling, and then there's the actual avoidance of Alzheimer's and other things down the line.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you for doing this with me. Great to cover a lot of these topics.
Been a pleasure. I've enjoyed it. And I know that the new year's coming and people make their New Year's resolutions, and a lot of people, want to improve their health. Well, this is the perfect time to do it. And if you catch me prior to the beginning of the new year watching this video, I do have my remote detox coaching on sale. It's $50 off its normal price. And I also invite you to join my Facebook group. All the links will be down in the description of this video.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you, Justin. I really appreciate it. And Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.